Hey everyone, this is your host Sonia, and welcome to Sonia's Space. I've created this friendly space to inspire and encourage my listeners throughout their day. On this podcast series, I want to talk about life, relationships, mental health, women empowerment, hardships, and new experiences. My goal is to have an authentic and vulnerable discussion with my listeners. Hey there, thanks for tuning in to episode 3. I'm super excited for today's episode as it's going to be a little different than what I've done previously. I released this episode a little later than I had anticipated. So my goal is to release an episode every 2 weeks, and unfortunately this time around it was a little later than I had anticipated. My husband and I, we traveled to Vegas recently, and turns out that we both got pretty sick from last weekend. I don't know if we had eaten something or if we were exposed to someone who was sick. I mean, we went to a football game, so, there were a whole bunch of people there. But we came back from our trip, and then my husband had to fly out for a work trip. And then I find out that he's having like fever, chills, and body aches in the hotel room. And then literally the next day, I started getting the same symptoms. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? So we both ended up getting the same thing, but unfortunately for my husband, it took a little bit longer for him to recover from that. It took him about a week. We were both pretty busy recovering from the sickness, but we're both doing much better now. And of course, I've also been busy with the wedding planning for my brother, his post-wedding reception dinner. So I've been busy talking to the vendors and whatnot. That's still ongoing. So last week was pretty hectic. Let's get into today's topic of discussion. It will be about interracial marriage and my interracial relationship journey with my husband, Jesse. And this topic today is going to be different than the other ones, as I'm going to have Jesse on board for the Q&A section. I've had quite a few people ask me to release an episode on this topic, and thank you all for the questions that I've received on Instagram. There were quite a lot of questions that I've received on my Instagram, and I've reviewed them with Jesse, and we decided to pick a handful from that list only because we feel that those questions are relatable to us and these questions resonated with us the most. Before I get into the Q&A session with Jesse, I feel like it serves right to kind of get into how we met. Jesse and I met at work at this medical device company back in 2018. So I had been working with him for a couple of years, but that's when we both kind of started talking. And fast forward, we got married last year. And I will say that talking to somebody outside of my race was challenging in the sense that the culture where I come from, and then worried about, what my parents would think in terms of like religion and whatnot. So I had quite a few fears in the back of my mind, just having to introduce him to my family. I just knew like deep down that like I wanted to marry Jesse. I feel like we're so aligned with our fundamental values and just our principles that we have on life. And I feel such a great sense of peace and happiness, which I've honestly never felt before. And I knew deep down that I wanted to marry this guy, and I did tell my parents about him. And they had their reservations, of course, right? Like, I think for them, like religion was a big thing. And number 2, just marrying outside of your culture is not totally acceptable, I would say, but it's different. And I just wanted to know how my parents would react to that. I think it was back in late 2020 when I told my parents about Jesse and told them that, I really like this guy and I want to marry this guy and he's a great person and I would like for you guys to meet him. And my parents, like I've said earlier, had their reservations, but they weren't against meeting him. So when I brought Jesse to my place for the first time, and my God, Jesse was so scared and nervous, but that meeting went by so well. It was very natural, and, we were just having casual conversations. And honestly, my parents didn't even question him that much. They were just getting to know the guy. And I remember when Jesse left my parents' house, my parents were like, he's such a great guy. He's such a genuine person. And I knew I would get that reaction from my family. And since that initial get together, the initial meeting, Jesse has gone to my parents' place multiple times. I mean, we've had dinners together, we've had brunches together. We even made a trip to Arizona for my post-grad ceremony. So Jesse was also there. So they were able to travel with him as well. And they absolutely adored Jesse. Another thing about Jesse, which I absolutely love, is that he has such an open mind about everything. And he's a really good participant when it comes to cultural traditions, like things of that sort. So like when my parents wanted to talk to him about religion or going to the mosque or participating in either traditions, like Jesse was such a great sport about these things. And I didn't want to really enforce anything upon him. I wanted him to come in with an open mind and be willing to understand our culture and traditions, and also the Islamic religion, you know, the understanding of only believing in one true God. And that was very important to me. And I think Jesse and I are very aligned when it comes to our fundamental values. And honestly, I'm the type of person that doesn't really look at, you know, different school of thoughts and stuff. I look at the core of the religion. And I myself am trying to teach myself more about Islam, right? Like you grow up in an Islamic household, and especially in the Pakistani culture, I feel like the way you're taught Islam isn't necessarily, I don't think it's the greatest way to teach somebody about Islam, because it was more so of do this and not why you're doing it. And I feel like I'm really teaching myself now at this age, like the spiritual meaning behind Islam and that love and connection that you have with God. And it's a continuous learning journey for me, and it's a continuous learning journey for Jesse. And I feel like we're in such a good place when it comes to knowing what we want in our lives and what to expect from each other. Okay, we are going to start with the Q&A session right now. Jesse, are you nervous to do this?
I'm a little bit nervous, but I'll give it my best shot.
Okay, I am actually really excited that Jesse's my first guest, and we're going to be answering these questions for you guys. Let's start with, what was Jesse's biggest fear in meeting my family? Just spotlight on you.
Basically everything. The first night I went over there, I had to think about, I didn't know how they were going to react to me, like not knowing what was going on. And I had to think about more things than I usually think about. Like I had to make sure I wore matching socks.
Yeah.
Because for my family, we always just wore shoes in the house, but I knew Sonia's family didn't do that. So yeah, I don't know. I was just worried that there would be cultural barriers or language barriers, and I wouldn't be able to be my kind of normal self. I knew I could get along with, people from my culture pretty easily. But that was just, yeah. So I was pretty much worried about everything.
Yeah, but how did it actually go? I think it went well, right? Were you like still nervous? I would say just a little bit, like at the beginning.
Yeah, and I was also worried about the food being too spicy and me like having to leave early or not being able to handle it. But that worked out too. Your mom went easy on me the first time.
Yeah, that's true. But they absolutely loved you, so that was great. Okay, so what was my biggest fear of meeting Jesse's family? I didn't really have any fears. I think my only fear was, just wondering like what they would think about me. But besides that, I didn't really have any fears. I met Jesse's parents. Where did we go? We went to Rainy Street, and I met them at Rainy Street, and we went out and had a good time. So it was
a Mediterranean restaurant.
No, we never went to the Mediterranean restaurant with them. That was just us. No, you guys went. I joined you guys.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. I didn't really have any fears compared to Jesse. On to the next question. So someone asked me if I had any culture shocks from me marrying into Jesse's family. Absolutely not. I mean, I grew up in the American culture. There was absolutely nothing that I was really shocked about. But yeah, that's basically my answer.
Is that completely true? Because sometimes when I cook things, you say that's the most white people thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's not shocking. It's kind of, I'm just putting it out there.
When I put sausage on bread with ketchup.
Okay, that is pretty shocking. That's pretty gross. But yeah, besides that, there wasn't really anything that I was shocked about. Let me ask you that question. What were some culture shocks for you going into my family and meeting my family?
I don't really know if they were shocks because I don't think I went in with like any expectation or preset things. So I don't know that it shocked me, but one adjustment was I've always been told it's very rude to eat food when people haven't had their plate served. So it was like the first time your family served me food, it was an awkward standoff for like 3 minutes where I was just sitting there staring at the food, waiting for other people to serve themselves before I would take a bite. And they were sitting there staring at me, expecting me to eat first. Until finally, I was like, Sonia, what's going on? Why is no one else eating? And she was like, oh, they're waiting on you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just to give you guys some background information. So in the Pakistani culture, we usually have the guests start eating first before we start eating. And Jesse was over here like, I'm waiting on you guys. And we're like, we're waiting on you. So that was pretty funny. And you still kind of do it.
Now I just come and get right in. I'm more used to it now.
I think they still kind of expect you. You still go first and then we all go next. So that's still happening. So another question would be, how do we handle conversations around having kids and teaching them religion and raising them? I made it very clear to Jesse that I wanted to raise my kids with Islamic values, of course, believing in one God and the last prophet, Ramadan and all of that. And I think we were pretty aligned on that.
So I think that, they're already naturally going to get most of my culture being in Texas and in the US. So I didn't really have anything specific I wanted to retain there other than being a fan of the University of Texas and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, I agree that it was important for them to maintain, the influence that Sonia's family and her culture had on her and their lives as well.
Mm-hmm. Another good question, are any challenges we dealt with that we didn't expect? I don't really, like at the beginning when we were like talking, I was afraid of, you meeting my family and like what their perception of you would be in terms of like culture and religion and, you not being Pakistani. I thought that would be a challenge. But then once you actually met them, like everything went well. So that would be like the biggest challenge that I had, like getting you to meet my family.
Yeah,
but after that, it's fine. Yeah,
I wasn't expecting to have to hide in the car when we went to Mighty Fine Burger and Shakes when we were dating. But otherwise, no.
Dude, you were so butthurt. So basically, when Jesse and I were dating, I told him that he has to wait outside in the car while I go get a shake from Mighty Fine. And Jesse was so butthurt. And I'm like, that's just how things are. Like, people can't see you, okay, that we're dating right now. Another question is, what is the best thing you have learned from each other's cultures?
I'll go on that one because it's probably easier for me. But I think the best thing I've learned is the focus on like family and taking care of each other. Mm-hmm. You don't see very many Pakistani people in nursing homes or even like taking Ubers to the airport because every time I mention it, your parents are like, no, we'll take you. We don't do Ubers here. So I really appreciate just kind of the closeness and the family focus.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer. I mean, in terms of culture, it's like, is it really a culture though?
Freedom.
Yeah, like freedom, right? Like, I feel like going into like marrying somebody that came from an American culture background, there's just a lot of freedom and a lot more open-mindedness about things. And I feel like Jesse's family was really open to everything in terms of like the wedding events and dancing at the Mendi and things of that sort. I think they were really like welcoming and caring and very understanding of our situation. Okay, the last question I would say is, how did your family feel? So my family, when they met Jesse or knew about him. So they, like I said, they had their reservations at first because, he's not Pakistani and just like us coming from a Pakistani background and like the religious background, like how he would be. But I like trusted my gut and I love Jesse so much. And I knew that Jesse would make a really good impression on my family. And like the first time he came over, he was so good about everything. And he was like talkative and he just kept an open mind about everything. And then like once he left, like both of my parents said, and my brother, that Jesse's like a very genuine and caring person and they can tell that like he really loves me. So that was the conversation that we had.
And I just texted you and I was like, do they like me?
Yep. Actually, yeah, I remember that. And I was like, yeah, they do. So alhamdulillah, it went really well. You did really well. You were a little nervous, but I was kind of too, because like it was my first time like having somebody on board and then like understanding the equipment and everything. It did make me a little nervous. So
it wasn't too bad. I'll come back.
Okay, yeah, you're definitely going to come back. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing this with you and we'll have some more podcast sessions later.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I love you.
Love you too.
So let's get into the new experience segment. So I have a segment in all of my episodes where I talk about a new thing or a new experience that I've had that helped me open up my mind a little bit more, or something that brought me joy. And for today's episode, I would like to talk about my first experience going to an NFL football game. So growing up, I didn't watch too many sports besides, I would say, like basketball, but I didn't grow up watching football too much. And I feel like throughout my relationship with Jesse, I was exposed to so much football. I mean, like, we're talking about NFL and we're talking about college football. So Jesse has always been watching a lot of football, and I had so much exposure to it. And I even got myself to join a fantasy football league with his friends. So my first year was 2 years ago, and I had so much fun. I mean, I'm telling you, I kind of didn't know what I was getting myself into. I kind of didn't even know what I was doing. I was just doing like side research online. But that was a lot of fun. And then this year is my third year being in that fantasy football league. So Jesse is a hardcore Steelers fan. And so we went to go watch the Raiders versus the Steelers game in Vegas, which was such a great experience. The fan base and the hype was so freaking real. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this. I mean, like, going to a concert is very different than going to a football game. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of testosterone in that football field. Like, you hear men getting so loud and they're just so into the football game. It's crazy. It was such a great experience. And not only that, since we were in Vegas for the football game, apparently Vegas has like really great shows. So Lil Wayne ended up doing the halftime show, which I was so stoked about. we honestly didn't even know that he was going to perform. Like, we found out an hour before the game when we were standing in line to get some drinks and food. And I was just so excited for that halftime show. I would definitely do another football game. I told Jesse that maybe we should go to Pittsburgh and watch the Steelers game. But yeah, overall, it was a very fun experience, especially it being in Vegas. We were in Vegas for the weekend, so it was really hype and we had such a good time. Thank you all for listening in today. I really hope you enjoyed having a guest on board and enjoyed the Q&A session with Jesse. I am so grateful for all of the support and feedback I've been getting. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Sonia Space, and follow me on Instagram for sneak peeks on upcoming episodes as well as other inspirational content. I hope your day goes well and I've left you feeling inspired.